How did that shit get so dangerous in Chicago?
I don't know. I was in jail most of the time. It was getting dangerous. It just happened.
But y'all shit, 104 niggas got shot in a weekend. Like, that's a different type of dangerous. Like,
what was K.I. like?
Man, K.I. was a cool girl, man. She was like, I knew her when she was a female, and you know, she transitioned once her friends started dying. She like just transitioned over to like she want to be something that she wasn't.
Imagine being so dangerous that grown men, hardened gang members, killers themselves, were afraid to say your name out loud. Now imagine you're 17 years old. Not a veteran, not a seasoned criminal with decades on the streets. A teenager, someone who should have been worrying about homework, about what to wear to prom, about what her life might look like at 25. But Gakirah Barnes never made it to 25. She never made it to 18. And by the time Chicago buried her in April 2014, the streets that raised her were already turning her into a legend, the kind that gets whispered, not spoken, the kind that follows people long after the body is in the ground. Her name was Gakirah Barnes, but the streets called her K.I. And for 3 years, she was one of the most feared names on Chicago's South Side. This is her story. To understand Gakirah Barnes, you have to understand Woodlawn. Woodlawn is a neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, sitting just south of Hyde Park, which is home to the University of Chicago, one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the world. The contrast couldn't be more brutal. On one side of the divide, Nobel Prize winners and ivy-covered buildings. On the other, a neighborhood that has been gutted by poverty, disinvestment, and decades of gang violence, so relentless it barely makes national news anymore.
We're following breaking news on Chicago's Northwest Side, where one person is dead after a shooting inside this bar. It's happening at the Levee at Fullerton and Keystone in the Hermosa neighborhood. A 38-year-old man was killed, and police tonight say no one is in custody.
Woodlawn wasn't always like this. In the mid-20th century, it was a vibrant black community, businesses, churches, jazz clubs, a functioning social fabric. But decades of redlining, white flight, and deliberate neglect from city planners stripped the neighborhood of its economic foundation. By the time Gakirah Barnes was born in 1997, Woodlawn was a war zone with a zip code. Growing up, that didn't mean you were destined to join a gang, but it meant the gang was always there, on your block, in your school, among your cousins and your classmates. It was the water you swam in. And for a lot of kids, it was the only structure that offered protection, belonging, and a sense of identity in a world that had otherwise written them off. Gakirah was born January 21, 1997. Her mother, Chantel Brown, raised her in this environment.
When it first happened, I already knew who was responsible from everybody being out there, because she wasn't the only one that was out there. It was like 20 people on the scene. The internet and the world ain't know who it's supposed to be in, allegedly, until FBI dropped the fact.
Doing what mothers in Woodlawn do, trying to hold things together while the world outside the front door pulled in the opposite direction. By all accounts, Gakirah was sharp, quick-witted, and fiercely loyal to the people she loved. She was also growing up in a place where loyalty to your people could get you killed. The Gangster Disciples are one of the largest and most powerful street gangs in American history. Founded on Chicago's South Side in the late 1960s by Larry Hoover, the gang grew from a neighborhood crew into a national criminal organization with tens of thousands of members across dozens of states. By the time Gakirah came of age, the GDs had splintered into dozens of smaller factions, neighborhood-level crews that operated semi-independently, often beefing with each other as much as with rival gangs. The faction Gakirah fell in with was known as the St. Lawrence Boys, an EBT and STL crew operating out of the Woodlawn area. Their primary enemies were the Black Disciples.
Big impression on King Von, even though they were on opposite sides of the gang war.
Gay, she just like she just like me. She's cool. Yeah, she was cool too.
The exact text was something along the lines of, "When it's all over with, I'm gonna get up in you," or something. Does that sound about right?
That sound raw. So yeah, I'll be saying raw. Yeah, I probably did say that. I called her. I talked on the phone too.
She did get a couple of tweets from a guy named King Von, who's from the rival gang, reaching out to her and proposing she be his girlfriend. We've got them here.
Yeah.
Specifically, though, Block faction, named after a man called Odee Perry, who had been killed in 2011.
Where O Block came from, like what made this hood, this block, whatever, famous? Like how did this come about?
Came from Odee Perry. Odee Perry got killed. Yeah, August 11th.
When?
2011.
OG Perry?
Odee Perry.
Odee Perry, okay.
That's one of the big guys.
Okay.
He died. He died, so that's how we got O-Block. In memory of him.
Okay.
O-Block would later become internationally famous because of its connection to Chicago drill rapper Chief Keef.
Where do you stay at? O-Block. What do you do for me? Bang bang. What's your name? Sauce.
And later to rapper Lil Durk. But in 2011, it was simply a crew of young men in Woodlawn, grieving their dead and looking for payback. This is the world Gakirah Barnes stepped into at age 14. No one is born a killer. That's worth saying plainly, because it's easy to look at someone like Gakirah Barnes and flatten her into a monster, a cautionary tale, a statistic, but the truth is more complicated and far more heartbreaking. She was 14 when she was first charged with firing a gun. The case was eventually dismissed when witnesses recanted, a pattern that would repeat itself throughout her brief life, because in Woodlawn, cooperation with police wasn't just frowned upon, it could get you killed. Somewhere in those early years of adolescence, Gakirah Barnes made a choice, or had a choice made for her by circumstance, to become someone the streets couldn't ignore. She became KI, she became a hitter. A hitter in Chicago street culture is a shooter.
How did that shit get so dangerous in Chicago?
I don't know. I was in jail most of the time. It was getting dangerous. It just happened.
But y'all shit, 104 niggas got shot in a weekend. Like, that's a different type of dangerous.
Ain't no, none of them niggas. It be like that. You gotta be careful though. You know that shit. You know how it is, Gilly. That shit, it be ugly. It get ugly. You know, niggas be mad. Niggas don't like niggas. Niggas be tweaking.
Someone willing to pull the trigger. In a world where reputation is currency and violence is the enforcement mechanism for everything, being known as a hitter carries enormous weight. It means you're not soft. It means you won't be tested. It means the people on your side feel safer knowing you're there. For a young girl in Woodlawn trying to survive, that kind of reputation was also armor. Law enforcement sources would later say she was a suspect in 3 to 5 shootings, including at least 1 murder. Street sources put the number far higher, some claiming she was responsible for as many as 15 to 20 shootings between 2011 and 2014. The truth, as with most things in the world KI inhabited, lives somewhere in the fog between official record and street legend. What is documented, what exists in black and white, is her Twitter feed. This is where Gakirah Barnes becomes something genuinely unique in the history of American street crime. Most gangsters historically kept their lives in the shadows. You didn't advertise, you didn't broadcast. The first rule of the criminal underworld has always been silence. KI didn't get that memo, or she simply didn't care. A 2016 study by Columbia University researchers found that between 2011 and April 2014, Gakirah Barnes posted over 27,000 tweets. 27,000. That's roughly 25 tweets a day, every day, for 3 years straight. She tweeted her grief when friends were killed. She tweeted her rage at rivals. She posted photos, she traded threats. She mourned losses publicly in a way that was utterly at odds with the silence traditionally associated with gang life. Researchers who studied her Twitter activity described it as a window into the psychology of someone living inside a cycle of violence with no visible exit. She wasn't performing for a broad audience. She was processing, in real time, a life that was moving too fast and burning too hot. She watched friends die. She attended funerals. She tweeted through all of it. She also, at times, posted things that made law enforcement sit up and take notice. Coded references, photographs, moments that hinted at a level of involvement in violence that went far beyond what could be proven in court. She was 17 years old, broadcasting her life to anyone who wanted to watch, and a lot of people were watching. One name sits at the center of KI's story like a dark star around which everything else orbits: Odee Perry. Odee Perry was a Black Disciples member who was shot and killed in September 2011. He was 20 years old. His death created a shockwave through the Woodlawn gang ecosystem. The block where he was killed, and where his crew operated, became informally known as O-Block in his memory. That name would later be carried around the world by the drill music scene that emerged from those same streets.
For the nigga that killed my cousin, make sure he dies slow.
Gakirah Barnes was alleged by law enforcement to have been involved in Perry's killing. She was never charged. Witnesses, as always, refused to come forward, but the allegation hung over everything. It was the act, more than any other, that cemented her reputation as KI, as someone to be genuinely feared. The retaliation was swift and sustained. The feud between the SDL-EBT faction and O-Block became one of the most violent ongoing conflicts on Chicago's South Side. Young men died, young women died, children caught in crossfire died. And KI was in the middle of it, not on the sidelines, not as a bystander, but as an active participant. She tweeted about some of it, she grieved some of it, she survived more of it than most people in her position had any right to expect. Until she didn't. The last day of Gakirah Barnes' life started the way many of her days started, with her phone in her hand. She tweeted a photo of herself and her friends, sitting on the porch of a home in Woodlawn. It was a normal moment, ordinary, the kind of photograph teenagers take 1,000 times, just existing, just being with the people they love, the sun out, nothing particularly heavy about the moment. A few hours later, at around 3:30 in the afternoon, Gakirah Barnes was shot on South Eberhart Avenue in Woodlawn. The location was blocks from where the photo had been taken, 3 blocks from where she lived. She was 17 years old. She died that day. The porch photo, the last image she posted, became one of the most haunting artifacts of her story. Taken hours before her death, in a neighborhood she'd spent her whole life in, surrounded by people she trusted. It was so ordinary it hurt. Chicago had seen this before. Chicago would see it again. But KI was not just another statistic. She was singular in her reputation, in her documented digital life, in the way her story cut against everything people thought they understood about gender and violence and who the streets could and couldn't consume. Gakirah Barnes' death did not bring peace to Woodlawn. It never does. Her killing intensified the feud between her faction and O'Block, sparking further retaliatory shootings that would ripple on for years. Her name became a recurring reference in Chicago drill music, sometimes mourned, sometimes weaponized as a taunt against her crew, sometimes held up as proof of how deep the violence ran. Researchers continued to study her Twitter activity long after her death, using it as a case study in how social media intersects with gang culture, grief, and cycles of violence. She became, in academic circles, a subject of genuine scholarly interest, which is an odd and bittersweet kind of afterlife for a 17-year-old girl from Woodlawn. Her mother, Chantel Brown, gave interviews in the aftermath, speaking carefully, the way mothers always speak when they're trying to hold their child's memory together without fully reckoning with everything that child may have done.
Hey, I'm Mom on forgiving King Von after killing her daughter.
When it first happened, I already knew who was responsible from everybody being out there, because she wasn't the only one that was out there. It was like 20 people on the scene. The internet and the world ain't know who it's supposed to be in, allegedly, until FBI dropped the files, public record. You know what I'm saying? I don't have no hatred or none of that towards nobody. You know what I'm saying? I don't feel either way swayed about it. Like, before the untimely death of the person, I honestly had forgave the person in my heart. You know, I used to tell people, I ain't mad at my daughter, I ain't mad at the killer, I ain't mad at nobody. You know, this life, it's a sad situation. And
she acknowledged the gun charge. She acknowledged the videos of Gakirah with a bandana over her face and a handgun in her hand. But she couldn't or wouldn't say definitively whether her daughter was a shooter. Maybe she didn't know, maybe she knew too well. Either way, she was a mother who buried a child. That part was not complicated at all.